That was such a beautiful introduction.
It was a really
beautiful.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you. And while I was listening, it brought something to mind. So just so you guys know, this is night 2 of our Samin and Yotam tour. We're very excited for our grand finale here. But
yesterday was the dress rehearsal.
Yesterday was this is the final.
This is the real thing.
And a question that I thought to ask you and I didn't get a chance that I think would be a beautiful place to start is I had the great pleasure of coming to London and spending some time with you in your kitchen lab, and I got to meet a bunch of your different employees. This was 2 summers ago, and I was struck by how many different places everybody came from. Can you tell us how many employees do you have, and do you know how many different countries they came from?
I never counted the number of countries where they came from, but I can list. I mean,
tell us some.
We have employees from from Brazil and from Guatemala and from Colombia, but not many from South America. That's where you get in North America more of them. But we've got Poles and Hungarians and Czech and Slovenian and Slovakians, and we've got Italians and Spanish and Greeks. I mean, I think every European nation is represented.
It's amazing.
North Africans, a lot. Indians. I think we have people from everywhere, really. But I never tried to look at how many countries. It would be the United Nations of food.
It is the United Nations of food. And so one of the things that I was so struck by, I felt like I was getting a little peek into the magical Ottolenghi private world, and I feel like our audience would love to hear a little bit about it. So I got to visit the kitchen lab where some friends of mine were shooting the last cookbook, and I got to watch how the books are made and how the recipes are made, and I found it so fascinating and unique. It's so different than a lot of home cooks who write books, right? They practice at home and they develop their recipes in their home kitchens, and chefs often bring somebody in to write with them in the professional kitchen, but you've created something different. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The word lab makes it
I made that up, sorry.
Makes it sound very high tech, but the kitchen is made to be look and feel like anyone's kitchen, really. And the whole business of creating recipes, for me, is about trying to replicate a home cooking scenario. So it's very low tech in many ways. It doesn't have any fancy equipment. The ingredients are quite basic. So at first, when I started tasting recipes, I thought I should go to, very fancy farmers markets and good butchers and all the rest. But actually, over time, I realized that actually I should buy at the cheap supermarket, and we test all our recipes on, standard supermarket ingredients. So I know what people that have not shopped in expensive places or didn't have time to go to a farmer's market or the inclination would get. So that's how we test the recipes. And the other thing is, yes, it's a very collaborative environment because it's the only way in which I know how to operate. I tried, but it didn't work out for me to be the kind of cookbook author that you describe. Before, Plenty was the last book that I did in solitude. And as much as I thought it was good, it worked because it's a good cookbook, but I did it all at home, and it was really weird. Like, I used to wake up in the morning and go and shop for the ingredients when I did recipe testing days, and cook and clean up and write the recipes down and file the copy to my publisher. And I felt in some ways it was fine, but it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And if you see what I mean, it was quite isolating. And then my
and who ate all the food?
You can always find good home for food.
It's true.
It's not a problem. There were neighbors or Carl when he came back home from work, my husband, or whoever was around. But the trouble was that actually in the instrumental moment when I needed to make decisions, or should I go a little bit in this direction or that direction, or change, or is it at least maybe not quite good as it should be, I was there on my own. But that was even not the main problem. The main problem, I think, was the creative process, because I just felt that the bouncing off ideas, which we have a lot in the restaurants, where the cooks talk to each other and recipes evolve and grow. I didn't have that. So Noam, who's one of our business partners, we're 4 business partners in Ottolenghi, and he's kind of in charge of something which sounds very big, but it's like the business development. He said, you know, you really need to get yourself a space and get some help. And I felt I really rejected that idea with I have to cook and I have to write and all those kind of things. And I'm saying it knowing that Samin and I had this conversation not long ago about her and how do you grow without losing your sense of control or a sense of what you think is your identity. And so I'm older and wiser, and I have been through this in a sense. And it was really difficult at first to create the test kitchen, what I call the test kitchen now. But it was really liberating, and now I don't understand how it could be done in any other way. So we get together, a group of us, we test recipes, we talk about them. People throw ideas in the air. We have these meetings once in a while where everybody suggests things, and it feels very natural now. It feels to me like it's the only way recipes can come about, 3 conversations. One of the girls, for instance, that you met is Esme. She's an English woman, and she worked many years on yachts cooking for very rich people, and she 8 years she was on boats. And when she came off the boat, when she was about 30, she started working on Ottolenghi, and she ran one of the kitchen for a few years, and then the prize of working for very long in Ottolenghi is you might end up in the test kitchen. That is an incentive. But those years on boats really
influenced
shaped her. Yeah. So one of the recipes in the book is her recipe. Esme and Tara are co-authors of this book. Is for fish fingers, and they have coconut on them, and they're from years of being on boats, and fresh coconut and fresh fish and coconut milk and all those elements ended up being on those fish fingers. So funny, like this is something that seems completely random that she works on boats ended up as a recipe in the book. And the book is full of these stories or these recipes which reflect the different people that were around at different places. So Esme's one, but there's chefs from the restaurants that come in and out of the test kitchen, trying the recipes, letting me try them and suggest. And so this is how it works.
And
creatively.
Helen, who's from Malaysia and
Helen
Australia?
is from Malaysia. In Australia, she's been working with me for years. She's a co-author of Sweet, which was the book we published last year. She has brought a whole bunch of cultural heritage with her to the table. And Scully, who was my co-author on NOPI, the book before that, has a really interesting heritage which takes him to also Malaysia, but also India or Afghanistan, a bit of Ireland, a bit of Australia as well. So there's all sorts of people coming from all sorts of places, and at the end I think it ends up being a very interesting party.
Well, it's a really beautiful, in this moment of, cultural appropriation is such a topic that we're all discussing, and I think rightfully so. It's kind of, you've created a beautiful bubble world by inviting, like San Francisco, by inviting all of these people into your world. It's kind of the opposite of appropriation. When you get to invite people, you give them the credit, you pay them, and then you give them the opportunity to share their thing, and it becomes all, one big work that you're making together.
It's really true, and in a way I have been in the center of controversies about cultural appropriation a lot.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I mean, not as, I don't feel that I had received a lot of criticism, but a lot of discussions have been had over when Jerusalem came out. It wasn't completely clean of controversy because people were asking what is the hierarchy here, and how do we address Sami and I, the occupation and issues that are quite difficult. And with Israel and Palestine, it's always very, very challenging because you want to give a positive message, but on the other hand, you don't want to undermine the reality, and it's always really tricky. So no matter what you say, someone is going to end up feeling that you haven't done justice to this particular side or cause. So it's difficult the way you tread over it. But I do feel quite strongly now that it's very easy to food for me, first and foremost, is about joy and fun, and it's very difficult that when all the conversations take away all of that. So I think we need to veer much more towards joy and fun and forget for a minute the rest. Unless you're really kind of, I have a really good example where I think the debate has really gone mad, and I can stand behind that completely. Is my husband is from Northern Ireland, so we go to Ireland quite a lot, and my mother-in-law, who's passed away unfortunately this summer, was used to cook traditional Irish food, and she wasn't the best cook, and I would tell her that to her face, and she would laugh about it. But she was great fun, and she had the best sense of humor. I told her, Greta, you cook broccoli like brisket. You know, it's like there's nothing left to cook after you this. But I experienced a lot of really good food experiences in Northern Ireland, and she taught me how to make certain soups, which are really delicious. And then a few years ago, I published a column in The Guardian for an Irish stew. And oh my God, the amount of controversy I got, because it had a bit of orange zest and a few herbs and some maybe a cinnamon stick or something, and people were really angry. Like I even didn't call it an Irish stew. I called it an Irish stew. It just says it's my Irish stew. But the people were angry. They said, "But don't you know that an Irish stew is just mutton and potatoes?" And I said, well, do I need to say anything else? I mean, who would want to cook that? But the people who were writing the notes were not even Irish, they were English. You know, protecting the poor Irish from this terrible cultural appropriation. And so this is where I feel that certain discussions really go crazy and people are being really oversensitive. Yes. And we really need to bring back the joy and the fun, especially in the world where much of the conversations about food are being conducted on phones. Online. And what happens is that people can really have cool conversations from all over the world, and there is a language which even people who don't share a language have a language with, all of a sudden we're pickling and fermenting, and then next thing we're kind of, we are drying certain ingredients. And I mean, you see that language evolving, and it's really beautiful. So I think if you're going to constantly look where the appropriation is and where things are going wrong, you're always going to find them, but then we're going to stop having conversations.
I agree. And also, for me, cooking is such a respite from there's so much pain. And so it's nice for me to be able to offer some kind of quiet moment for people to come together, and I feel like that's something that we really share, is let's bring joy into this, and don't think about it or don't be thoughtful.
No, you have to be thoughtful, but you need to put your thoughts in the right places.
Absolutely. I wonder, in this group scenario, as in your kitchen, test kitchen, I'm going to use the right term, can you describe, have you guys settled on a definition of what is an Ottolenghi recipe?
This has also evolved over time, and I think sometimes I find myself really make myself laugh when I talk about myself in the third person about my
I was actually going to ask if it gets old.
It's really the first time it happened to me, and I'm not. The only reason why my name is on the door is not because I'm narcissistic or because when we opened the business, we were 4 partners, Sammy and myself and Noam and Alex, who's not a big partner, but he's the designer. They said, we need this name. It's a good name for a restaurant. And I was like, okay, well, it's okay. But a few months after I picked up the phone and I said, Ottolenghi, good morning, or something, it was just such a weird experience. And then more recently, when recipes started to evolve, I realized that in some ways this is something that that has been created, but I have very little control over at this stage about what it means to be an Ottolenghi dish. So people have a completely kind of a clear set of expectations. And a couple of years ago when we were testing recipes for the NOPI cookbook, I remember really clearly that Scully was cooking this pea soup, and he had like this amazing technique of keeping it super vibrant and super, green by chilling it straight away. And it was a really beautiful, solid recipe that the peas were tasting so fresh. But everybody tasted it and said, wow, but then I think someone said, but it's not very Ottolenghi.
Like it needed 20 more ingredients.
It's like, what would people say? And that was a real enlightening moment for me, that I understood that there's something beyond that I cannot do. And we were talking about being like trapped within the parameters. And I'm not complaining about it, it's just an observation that there's a certain, there's an expectation.
And so how did you, since the Ottolenghi thing, if I may be so bold, involves often like many garnishes and ingredients, and then the premise of this book is its simplicity. How did you translate, how did you distill Ottolenghiness into...
I love Samin. So it was actually easier than we thought, because what I realized is that, in a sense, you could achieve something which has a few of the aspects that you're talking about. I always think about it as there needs to be some kind of left of field thing, that's something you hadn't expected, a surprise or a tension. Sometimes I like to call it tension, although it doesn't mean that it's not comforting, but it just feels that it's like I haven't had that before, or it's weird in a good way. And I found that it's actually doable with less ingredients. It doesn't need to be there. And it's not like we're using 3 ingredients. The category of few ingredients is 10 or less, right? So we haven't gone down to the 5 or the 3s, and that would be a disaster for me. But the 10 or less still allowed us, I think, to have that. And one of the dish that is on the cover, at the center is the tomatoes over cold yogurt, has got a few contrasts in it, the contrast of color, but also contrast of temperature. So the yogurt is really cold, fridge cold, and the tomatoes are hot, straight out of the grill or the oven. And that contrast for me, there's some Urfa chili as well, which is a really great chili we can talk about. It's smoky and sweet from Turkey. But that contrast was kind of enough, even if there's only 5 or 6 ingredients in that particular dish, to give you the Ottolenghi effect, to go like, oh wow, that is really interesting. And that's what we try to achieve in every recipe, and I think, I hope it was successful.
I think so. Well, one thing that I find really interesting, both as a writer and as a cook, is constraints. I find that often, like, limitations, whether it's of space or time, they often force me to be a lot more creative. Yeah. So I think, how did you had multiple constraints that you set up for yourself, because there were some recipes were time, some were ingredients. How did you divide them up in the book?
So that's so true about constraints are actually really, really useful for recipe writing, because imagine you wake up in the morning and say, I need a recipe. And there's absolutely no parameter for this conversation. Where do you start? And I find it really useful to have a restraint, so a theme or a kind of a set of rules or guidelines by which you're going to work. But with this particular book, in a sense, we collected a set of recipes. So many of the recipes, most of them have been published in The Guardian, in my column in The Guardian before. But what we've tried to do when we collected them and thought about this book is really try to figure out what does simple cooking actually mean. There's a lot of books that have the word simple or easy on the title, but I don't always know that it's actually about a recipe. As for me, easy or simple is about a personality or a state of mind. So what is easy for me is not necessarily easy for you, right? I mean, we have different ways of approaches in the kitchen, and I've maybe not cooked something that you've cooked, and vice versa. And so every person brings their selves into the kitchen. So what Tara, who has really helped at crystallizing the whole concept of how to put the book together, said, let's try and see what people say when we ask them, what's an easy meal for you to cook? What's a simple recipe for you to make? And people came with really very different answers, and those informed the system. So the book is divided into different type of cooks or different types of categories of simple. It's based on the acronym SIMPLE, 6 categories. The S stands for short on time. The I stands for ingredients 10 or less. The M stands for make ahead. So every recipe that you can prepare the night before or in the morning and serve the following day, or reheat. The P stands for pantry, ingredients, recipes that are based on ingredients that you probably have in your pantry or that you don't need to go on a journey into your very exotic part of the town to buy in a very exotic shop. The L stands for lazy, ingredients that are like stews and soups and things that you just put there and they cook themselves, essentially. And the E stands for easier than you think. That's the bonus category. And those are recipes that they seem complicated or difficult because of your preconception. There's things like ice cream or bread or things with a French name, often.
It feels more complicated if it's French.
Yeah, sauté or confit or all those things. But in actual fact, they're just names for very simple kitchen techniques. But people think they're chefy, but they're not. So every recipe in this book would be simple in at least one of these 6 ways. So if you want to cook a dinner party and you want to prepare everything tonight, it's Saturday night, you've got people over for lunch on Sunday, you go for all the M recipes and you go, M is the make ahead. I can make everything ahead of time, and then when it's time to cook, I use the M recipe.
That's my kind of cooking.
Yeah, it's just
and
makes sense.
And the L, lazy, that's my other kind.
But on the other hand, if you want to come back from work and you think, oh, what should I cook? You go through, quickly look through the P pantry and you go like, oh, rice, pasta. I've got tinned chickpeas. I've got a jar of tins of sardines or anchovies in the fridge or in the cupboard, and I can make that pasta dish without even leaving the house.
That's awesome.
So that's the system. So we had to complicate it because it's Ottolenghi.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, it does simplify a bit.
What motivated you? Was it the idea of trying to speak to a larger audience, or were there complaints?
There were.
Is that what you were responding to?
I have the party line and I have the real line. So the party line is that I don't read the comments in The Guardian underneath my column because I just couldn't care what people rate.
Yeah.
But the real truth is that I do read them. And I know I've kind of heard it all before. The book starts with this, like the Ottolenghi Simple is an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist.
I do like the part where you have you're like making fun of yourself in your introduction.
Yeah, I mean, but you have to, because there is a grain of truth in it, but it's also been completely exaggerated, because if someone has been cooking my food, they know that there's a whole range of levels of complexity. And the other thing, I think, with perceiving my food as complicated is kind of a little bit rooted in a misconception about cooking. I think there is simple cooking, northern Italian cooking is about taking ingredients that are really good and doing very little to them. Mm-hmm. But when you start traveling in the world, if you go to places like like the Indian subcontinent or Southeast Asia, it takes a lot of ingredients and a lot of effort to make a meal. You get all those ingredients together, you cook them. So it's not, I haven't invented those kind of techniques that are quite complicated. You take quite a lot of spices and you cook them slowly to make the basis of your whatever
dishes.
It is, the dish that you're making. But there is this thing in the West that you are going to make a meal in 20 minutes, and that's kind of the normal thing. But it isn't really normal. I think most cooking cultures there's much more work involved than that.
Well, also, I think building a pantry, which is a very Ottolenghi thing to do, is something so important. I mean, I just experienced this going to Mexico recently, and I was trying to recreate some recipes that we had made so simply with other cooks in Mexico. And I came home and I realized that it was really hard for me, because there we could just go to the market and buy these ricados, these like masala powders. Yeah. But I had to go back and make seek all of the spices, toast them all, pound the garlic, and make it all from scratch. So if you're in the place, or if you already have the pomegranate molasses and the spices and all that kind of stuff,
absolutely.
it really isn't actually that much work.
It isn't. And technically, it's never been complicated. Like, I've never included any recipe. NOPI cookbook is a bit different because it's a restaurant cookbook, and we always declared that there will be techniques that are not necessarily home cooks have done before, but with all the other books, there hasn't been. It was never my intention to challenge anyone technically to cook something that they have never cooked before. But there has been quite a bit of washing up involved. I'll take that.
So at the end, at the end of a long recipe testing day, or like visiting all your different restaurants where you've been eating all of these different things, what do you do when you get home? Yeah.
So actually, the good thing about this particular book is that it includes quite a few of the recipes that Tara or Esme and I cook when we get home, and we never thought they were worthy of publishing in a cookbook. So there's a couple of recipes for jacket potatoes, baked potatoes. Baked potatoes, I think, is the term that is used here, which nobody has ever thought they're going to see in Ottolenghi cookbook. But it was really Esme's agenda. She said, I want to Ottolenghi-fy the baked potato. Hence, we've got this delicious baked potato. I really highly recommend trying to make it with tonato, sauce, capers, and poached, or just an egg or hard-boiled egg. And technically, it's super simple. It's a quick thing to make a tonato, and it's so good. And there's another one with gorgonzola and spinach and walnuts. Again, like you just bake your potatoes and you put all these things inside, and it melts and it's delicious. So those are the kind of things. Or from my side of home cooking, there is a pasta dish that I cook quite often. Is the one with harissa, which is a chili paste from North Africa, olives, capers, and yogurt. So it's it's a Southern Italian, North African kind of pasta dish, and it's super quick to make.
I feel so vindicated that you put yogurt in pasta. Because I grew up, in Iran, we put yogurt on everything. So when my mom would make pasta with just like meat sauce, my brothers and I would put big dollops of yogurt on it to cool it down, because that was our main reason, was to make food cooler so we could eat it faster. But I really loved the creaminess and the taste. And then once I went to Italy, I was like, oh God, I've really been doing something horrific. So I'm feeling very empowered right now.
Completely. I'm glad I can offer you that service.
Thank you.
But cooking with yogurt in Persian cooking, but also in Turkish, Palestinian, Georgian, I mean, it's a real thing. And I mean, cooking pasta or noodles or whatever it is that you want to call it for that particular culture is so good. It's so good. Whether you add it towards the end or whether you cook it slowly with it, there's a lot of regional variations. And in Jerusalem, we have a recipe that is Armenian, in which you cook the pasta in the yogurt, and it's so good. Yeah,
I gotta check it out.
You gotta check it out.
That's amazing. So, do your kids like Ottolenghi recipes, or do they like regular?
My kids like their other dad's food more than my food.
The Irish food.
Yeah, they like the Irish food. Yeah, It's quite tricky. I mean, they do like the cakes that come from me, but they prefer the pies and the casseroles and the fish pie, a fish pie, a British fish
like a
with a
shepherd's pie, but
potato.
with fish instead.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So Carl makes it really well. So they do prefer that. And deep down inside, when I come home from work, I always complain that he cooks all this simple food for them, and I've got nothing left. Because that's the kind of thing you want after having this kind of all this crazy, rich, complicated Ottolenghi food all day.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, often when I come home, all I want is boiled vegetables, rice, an egg or something so clean and simple.
Yeah, rice with a bit of butter and salt and pepper. It's just like
my new combo is soy sauce, butter, rice.
Yeah,
it's really good. Yeah,
so good.
Really good. Highly recommend.
Yeah, a particular soy sauce.
Yes, a fancy one. Yes. Wow. Okay. You're really like blowing. I'm still back at the yogurt back there.
Well, but I want to say one other thing about ingredients, the complicated ingredients, the ones that people complain about being, having to schlep to the other side of the world to get. And in this particular book, there is a kind of a contract that you sign when you buy the book, and the contract includes that you only need to buy 10 exotic ingredients. We worked hard on limiting the number to 10, and the 10 ingredients are kind of flavor bombs. They're listed at the end of the book and also at the start of the book. And you don't really need to go and buy all of them, but the idea behind those 10 ingredients, and they include some ingredients that we mentioned, like pomegranate molasses, or preserved lemons, or black garlic, or tahini. Tahini is the most important one, of course. Yes. If you get them, they're not expensive and they have a long shelf life. You can cook through this book and get through quite a bit of it, like most of it, without having to go to a specialist supermarket or a shop.
Well, that's pretty clever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But and that was really intentional. Again, Tara, who was very clever, just said, let's just try to narrow it down to 10, because people who would still want the special ingredients, and black garlic, which is it's a more recent addition to the Ottolenghi pantry, is a garlic which is aged over a couple of weeks. It originates in Korea, actually.
What does it taste like?
And it tastes like licorice or chocolate. It goes really black.
Wow.
But it's just normal garlic that's been aged in a particular way. And it's really great when you kind of whiz it into sauces, like yogurt-based sauces, or even like a barbecue sauce for meat, or if you want to use it with vegetables, or celery root with barbecue sauce. It's so delicious. But if you add some black garlic into it, it's really good. Or you can even slice. You don't eat it just like that, but if you slice it really thinly, you can add it to salads. So it's a great thing. So what I was saying is that all those ingredients, you don't want to. You still want something really special, and those, the addition. When you cook simply, or when you reduce the number of fresh ingredients that you're going to use, some things are great shortcuts. Like Parmesan cheese.
Yes, of course, that's my shortcut.
Or even feta, or wine, or fish sauce, or soy. So. In this book, there's 10 of those, and I mentioned a few of them, but they really go a long way. So you buy a jar or a container of that thing, and that will, take you through quite a bit in the book.
Oh, I'm really into this. It's a beautiful constraint. I mean, for you guys as writers of the book, to limit your
choose
recipes.
what we wanted. So we had to choose. We thought like one spice, and we chose ground cardamom. Ground cardamom. Cardamom is it's a great spice. I mean, cumin and cardamom,
my two favorites.
They're really great. Yeah, they are. And they have a transformative power, especially cardamom, I found, because it also works in desserts. So if you buy a jar of ground cardamom, it saves you quite a bit of pounding of the seeds, getting out the pods, getting out the seeds and crushing them, which is not a big deal. But if the idea is to kind of make shortcuts and make people cook a bit quickly, then a jar of this ground cardamom, you can add it. There is a recipe there for soba noodles with avocado, lime, and pistachio. And the cardamom is like the secret. It's like, wow, because lime and cardamom, it's a great combo. So that's one of them. So that's the spice we chose. And there's a chili flake, the urfa that I mentioned. Again, you go and you spend a bit of time and you look for the urfa chili flake, and it's not that difficult to get online. But once you have it, then it's a great finishing chili for anything, really.
I'm so hungry now. I wanted to talk. I think one of the really distinctive things about your work that I've noticed over the years is your work is so visually driven, and your book, the way your books are photographed. I loved spending time in the kitchen lab with you when you were shooting that book and watching you guys work, because I'm used to photo shoots where they bring stylists in and prop stylists and food stylists and photo people, but you really did it so simply with basically just you and the photographers. Yeah. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how how your work is visually driven and how you work on these on the photos.
you're right to point out that the visuals are really important to me, and I spend a lot of time. This is actually my favorite bit of doing a book is the photography days. I really look forward to them. They're like really special days, and I think I enjoy it because it's the final stage. You know, you've got the recipe and you know it's good, etc. But before it's been shot, it's not quite complete. But it also it comes from my so people who come to the Ottolenghi shops or restaurants, not so much to NOPI or Rovi. There is a very clear, distinct visual language for the display that Sammy and I really developed over the years. For the savory side, it's one style, and for the cakes, it's slightly different. But
it's we all know the meringues.
Yeah, the meringues, the cakes, the salads. And I find that it's something that in hindsight, I think it kind of echoes the whole kind of marketplace that we were growing up in Jerusalem. I never thought about it until Jerusalem came out, but I think it does have something to do with that. But it's something that I'm very super sensitive. There's only one thing that people that are my employees are scared of is when I come into the shops is that the displays don't look good. Because this is the one thing that I really notice. As soon as I come in, I start fiddling with the display and making sure everything looks good. And it's really just about the bottom line. If the food doesn't look good, it doesn't sell. And it's as prosaic as that. So it's always been at the top of my agenda. And the books actually came later. They came after the shops. And I just think I just carried on the same aesthetics to the books, where I want it to look really good, but I also want it to look natural. I don't want someone else to fiddle with it and change it from the way I look at it,
in your shop.
The way I would have it in the shop. So that's the visual language of the books. It's really been completely created as a result of the shops, and there's no stylist, because I just want to be the one who puts it out in front of the photographer. And Jonathan Lovkin, who is the photographer in most of my books, apart from Sweet, is really, and I love working with him. It's just we're a team of two, and Esme was cooking, but once she's cooked it, she would hand the bowls to me, and I would arrange it on the plate, and that is the highlight of my year, is the photography weeks. I absolutely love it.
That's amazing. I mean, I do think that there's a way where your style is this kind of beautiful hybrid between the super stylized, magazine kind of shoots and stuff like that, and then my book, which is illustrated. Yeah.
You just ducked the whole problem.
I just avoided the whole thing. But I really did enjoy. I feel like I learned a lot from you watching you do it. Because I learned to cook from Alice Waters, who her thing in the restaurant was always like, a salad should look like it fell from heaven onto the plate. She doesn't want too much fussing and fiddling, and it really should look very natural.
And it's very funny because Jonathan and I we have this thing that when we literally dropping the food onto the plate, now it is physically falling onto the plate, and we always find that the way it falls the first time is the best.
Yeah.
And the second time, or a couple of changes, it's just never. We always go to the first bit, because he takes 50 or 60 pictures for every dish, because it's easy now with digital photography. But actually, it's the first images when it just fell look the most natural. Nobody played with it.
Is there a way that you could put into words what a dish that looks mouth-watering, or what a display that looks mouth-watering? What do you look for? Is it contrast? Is it colors?
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's contrast. It's a contrast within a dish, but also within the food and the plate. It has to have a certain volume or height, which you can also get in a photograph, even if it's two-dimensional. It's really important to get the sense that you're kind of diving into something, that it's not flat. And I really think about that quite a lot, both for the display and for the food. There's things that it cannot be over-organized, over-stylized. It immediately evokes things that for me are like the commercials, like food that has been over manicured or messed with. It has to have I love that metaphor from Alice about food falling from heaven. Might use that actually. Yeah.
Nobody needs to know.
Yeah. Nobody will know.
Well, I mean, I think for me, my first exposure to your work was I saw the first Ottolenghi book, the British version, which on the cover has the photo of one of the displays in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it was so striking to me, and even every time I've been in any of the restaurants, to come in and see these huge inviting platters of food. And I think I always felt like kinship with you, because to me, every time I serve people, I always insist on family style, because I really believe that bringing people together to the table and making them talk to each other, even if it's just, will you pass me this plate? You know, that's the way a conversation begins.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if, you know, is that something that you were trying to get across? Is that a signal, like a subliminal message that you were trying to send?
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't think, I don't think I've done it consciously, so that subliminal message. But I remember when we opened our first little cafe in Notting Hill 16 years ago, and there was I knew, and Sammy was always pushing for that as well, that we wanted to have everything out in the open, both producing the boxes as they come out of the market, and the food on display, and the dining had to be communal. So we even sacrificed. There's no bathroom there. You know, we had to take all the space for the food, and it was about. There was no bathroom because it's a takeout shop. But essentially what it stands for is the fact that everything needs to be out in the open. That kind of transparency with the food. And for me, there's nothing as soul-destroying as a restaurant with no one bit of food to see
or smell
as you walk in. There's, where we were talking about Camino.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
That's such a great restaurant that we've had events in before. And the first time we met was actually in Camino in one of my book events. And for me, this is another version of the ideal scenario for a restaurant where the food is either prepared in front of you or is stored next to you, that connection with the food is really, really important. And then the next step would be how we interact. You know, when we get in and we're surrounded by food, of course, it makes us appreciate, have conversations. So there's always communal dining. So for me, it's just a replicate of some kind of mythical, home dining experience that maybe not everybody has had, but we're all yearning for. Sit around a big table surrounded by food.
I wonder, I'm always sort of circling around this idea of removing separation, like what you're talking about, and bringing people closer together. And I'm of two minds when it comes to Instagram and digital food, food on screens. Because on the one hand, I'm like, the last thing or even making a show like I just did. Because if you're watching me on a screen, you're probably not cooking and talking to other people. Or if you're on your phone, you're probably not doing the thing I want you to do, which is to be in community. Yet, maybe I can use it to inspire you. And so I wonder, do you have as tortured a relationship to Instagram as I do?
I do, and I think this tension is real, and it's the tension of our time. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and I really don't have a solution, because on the one hand, like I said to you before today, it really enhances conversations and creates communities. The communities of cooks, the international community of cooks that has evolved over the last 20 years is incredible. When I went to culinary school, chefs didn't talk to each other, and they all kept their secrets in books, And it was incredible. I remember it so clearly how much of a secret the chef's recipe book was. It was insane. And now it's just like the opposite. Everything is open, and people are having pop-ups in other people's restaurants, and people come and cook in their kitchens. It's this constant exchange of information, and it's very much thanks to technology. I mean, because it's easy to be in contact like that. But the other side of it is exactly that people, first of all, they have like a completely impossible perception of what food should look like or does look like, because with all the filters, it's not even about the filters. It's just about the two-dimensionality and the fact that you can't smell or taste. It's just not the thing. So that's the one thing, and then the other is that we're glued. We're not having those conversations. So it kind of does the two opposite things, and it's very hard to square the circle or circle
Trust
that
me,
square.
I
I can't
know.
remember what you
I know.
said.
Okay, I'm gonna out you right now.
Please.
Yeah.
You're
I
gonna talk about
discovered
my underwear.
not about the underwear. Don't worry,
Okay.
not that. No, but I discovered something deeply controversial and upsetting about you yesterday.
What is that?
Which is that you've never been to Mexico.
Oh, yeah. I might have to go
so-
to Mexico to buy underwear.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
I told you I wasn't going to bring up the underwear. You brought it up for the record. But I, it was kind of shocking to me because I think of your food as so deeply flavorful and, involving so many of the same ingredients. And you put a thought that I have had into beautiful words when you discussed this yesterday. So can you tell us about, first of all, when are you planning to go to Mexico?
We're going to go to Mexico
we're going to go
together.
together, okay.
We're going to go to Mexico
You can all
together.
come. And but I really loved hearing you talk about sort of your unified theory of Ottolenghi cooking.
Well, yeah, thank you. No, the Mexico is a travesty. I have to admit, it is really. I've got nothing to say to justify this situation. But I think we were talking about people asking you about the regions or what regions in the world are you inspired by or work for you in your cooking, and I have given this quite a lot of thought because, in a sense, I started off in Jerusalem, which is kind of in the heart of the Middle East, and it's as diverse as it was. There's many parts of the world that I haven't been to. So over the years, I have explored North Africa, I have explored India, Southeast Asia, and I've been either physically traveling to those places or, reading books and having food cooked for me by people who come from those places, Mexico and certain places in South America. And all of a sudden it just occurred to me that in actual fact they really all have things in common, and they're very sunny places, and the sun really ripens things up and makes things grow that don't grow in places that are less sunny than that. But also there's a lot of commonalities.
Cilantro.
There's cilantro, there's chili pastes and
Limes.
chilies and citrus, all citrus, whether from a lime to a lemon to yuzu to there's a lot of those, and there's using the cooling effect of yogurt or other dairy products. They kind of go through all these regions. A paste like the curry paste that we were talking about, which is not even called a curry, but is actually available in most of these cultures. There's a lot of commonality. So when I choose my destinations, it always makes complete sense to me. If I went to Malaysia, I go of course I'm going to Malaysia because it's an extension of the Middle East.
Right.
And I do think in a certain extent Mexico is that, but I've yet to discover.
We're going to go. I'm going to take you. But it is a beautiful way for me of looking at, from one of my main sort of theses is good cooking around the world is more similar than it is different, and that we as humans just seek the same things in our mouths. Deliciousness is defined sort of universally by these contrasts and by these basic flavors, and it is so delightful for me to see these things reappearing and the techniques reappearing, and the mortar and pestle reappears, and the pounding of the spices and the pastes. And so I loved hearing you.
It's almost like it's ingrained in our mind to be attracted to these particular combinations. It's like, so you don't have to put all these notes together, but we end up putting all these notes together because that's how we are programmed, that's how we operate as humans.
I wonder, I guess one last question I have for you is, not to put you on the spot, but especially in moments like this, in times like this, when the world does feel so divided, I like to believe, and people like to sort of project onto cooks, the power of food to bring people together. And I wonder, sometimes in my most sort of idealistic times, I believe that it can be the thing that brings people together. And other times I feel really cynical and I'm like, come on, this is where politicians come in, or, doctors. And I wonder, what do you think? What are, in your brightest, most positive moments, what do you think that we can do as cooks and as as home cooks, as people bringing people together?
I mean, there's actually one answer, and that's cook, because I think the cooking entails all the things that we just talked about, the communality. And I remember when I started cooking professionally, I remember the one thing that really I found staggering is how easy it is to create a really good vibe, with food. It sounds really trivial because we kind of know it and we're told it all the time, but it's an eternal truth. As soon as the food arrives, there's just a really good vibe. And I think, so cooking is really essential. Like, a world without cooking is definitely one that you won't be able to heal any fracture, because people will not have those moments of where nothing else matters. And it's an international language. We can all sit down and eat. Nobody chooses not to eat, right?
It's true.
And so all these things, that's really the solution. It's nothing really clever. It's just the act.
Yeah. It is the most generous thing I think you can really do for someone is to cook for them. I mean, I'm always like, who's going to cook for me? So maybe you will.
I will.
I'll cook for you anytime.
I'll cook for you anytime.
Thanks. I was just trying to get that out of it. But I want to thank you so much, because just also on a super personal note, I have looked up to you for so long.
Thank you.
And, my family's from Iran, and I came up in very Western, very white elite kitchens. And you were a very bright light for me to look to, using ingredients and the tastes of my childhood and my culture and bringing them and elevating them to the world stage. Like, nobody knew pomegranate molasses before you. and it's a taste that I grew up with my whole life. And I'm so appreciative to you for what you've done for the people of my culture and of so many cultures. And a lot of us look up to you. So thank you. Thank you for your work. Please keep doing it. Yeah. I'm sure that there's some questions for you beyond what I can think of. So how do we do the question time?
So we have microphones on both sides of the aisle. We'll kind of go back and forth. And our first question is down here in the front on your left.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Ottolenghi, is that what I should say? I don't know. Anyway, Samin expressed exactly how I feel, so I appreciate those amazing words that you said. I would like to know, if you could have a last meal, what would it be?
My last meal. But it's so difficult to choose because, but you don't want to hear about all that. You want to hear about the last meal. So it will be one recipe from this book, which is called Gnocchi alla Romana. That's my grandmother's semolina dumplings. And rather than me explaining how good it is, you just go home and cook it, because most of you will have the book. But essentially, it's like pillows of cheesy deliciousness that is put under the grill, and it's very good. And that would be my starter. And now I need to think of maybe for the main course I'll have that recipe that I'm just thinking in cookbooks now because it's just easier. I'll have the chicken cooked in rice.
I love that one. I'm so glad you said that. Yes.
That I published in Jerusalem. The only problem is that once I did an interview for the New Yorker with Jane Kramer, and when she came to my house, I undercooked the chicken.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure it made for a good article.
She wrote about it, yeah. So that was that. And well, the dessert I'll tell you later. I'll have to think of it and let you know. Might be a custard or sabayon.
Then the next question is in the middle.
Here.
Do you have a special brand of tahini that you use? I've been very curious.
Probably I shouldn't be saying anything about a special brand of tahini, not because I think tahini it's really important to use good tahini, just like olive oil. But I don't know what's available here. Do you want to?
When I visited you, what I noticed in England is that there's a lot of the tahinis that are imported there are really grainy. Whereas so much of our tahini that's just readily available is much smoother.
Which is what you want.
Yeah, which is what you want. And so I can't remember what brand you had either, but I remember you pointing it out as a smoother one.
Yeah.
So I think any of the smooth ones, I mean, there's that incredible stuffed soum that's made by the 3 women, I think in Philadelphia. That's really like extraordinary. Oh, and is it Seed and Mill, Jordan?
Yes, Seed and Mill.
Seed and Mill is another really delicious one.
I think what you're looking, because I don't know these brands really, because I haven't tried them, I think you're looking for a real, with good tahini has to be smooth, like Samin said, but it also needs to feel, the sesame seeds need to be toasted really well. So it's a bit like a good toasted sesame oil. You want to have that kind of sense of almost caramel, like a really deep a flavor of things. So when it's very pale and slightly watery and you don't have that sense of really intense flavor, that's not a good one.
The next question's on your right.
Thanks. So I actually bring in from Israel, I bring har bracha, which is an amazing tahina, but you can't buy it anywhere in the US. So we have to smuggle it through customs. And it's always
recommend whoever goes to Israel to smuggle through customs one of the Palestinian tahinis from Nablus, which is called camel or dove. They always are named after animals. I don't know why, and they're all very good. Or from Israel, there is El Arz, which is from Nazareth, which is also very good.
And the one with the rooster, the red chicken on it.
The red
rooster. I've gone through all of them. Every time on the customs forum, I just write assorted souvenirs, and no one ever asks any questions. But actually, on the tahina question, so I grew up in an Israeli home and had tahina and everything, but it was always very basic old recipes. What is the most counterintuitive pairing that you've ever had with tahina? That is amazing. Counterintuitive, right? Something that I've had your chocolate. My wife loves your books, and I've eaten so much of your food, and a lot of it is beautiful pairings with tahina as a flavor that you wouldn't usually have. So
I can go on about tahina forever, but because we really don't have time, so I'll just give you a number of uses. So one thing that is really delicious is over bread, or even better, banana bread. If you make your own banana bread and you drizzle it with raw tahini, straight from the thing, and then you drizzle that with honey, it's heaven. That is what you want to do.
There's a delicious tahini banana bread recipe
Tahini banana bread recipe.
Yeah, with tahini in it.
In it?
Yeah.
But I'm a bit worried because cakes with tahini in them, it's really difficult to get just right. They turn dry, so I would try that. But the spreading it on banana bread with honey is just to die for. Yeah.
We have another question at the top. Last row, all the way up here.
Hi. So one quick comment. Samin, we cooked while watching your show yesterday. Can you just raise your hand really high
and wave your hand so I know where you are?
Oh, yes, hi.
Oh, hi.
We cooked watching your show yesterday, and we're hanging out, and so I want to let you know people are doing that. They're not just sitting and watching TV.
Thank you.
But my question is, with Yotam, with your new book, or your new restaurant, Rovi, what was the inspiration there? Because it kind of differs from us who are reading your cookbook, kind of what you generally produce.
Yeah. So Rovi is the restaurant that we opened a few months ago in central London. And what it is that you probably know because you've cooked, so some of you may have cooked from the recipes, and they always love grilling things. But we always did it on a grill in the kitchen over thing, because the weather is not really always so great for barbecuing in the UK, so there's always this, you find solutions, right? So one of them is to put the grill on the stove and heat it up really well, and then char grill, whatever you need to do. But this one is like, finally, there's an amazing toy, which is this incredible barbecue that comes from Spain. And the restaurant really is all about, well, mostly about grilling vegetables. And the idea was that we are taking a lot of seasonal vegetables grown in the south of England mostly, and cooking them through the seasons. And that's what we do. It's not only vegetables, there's also fish and meat, but predominantly vegetables. And that's the restaurant story, and the grill is actually visible. So when you walk in, you can see things as they're cooked, as it happens.
I think you have to tell her about the signature dish.
About the corn?
No. I was thinking the celeriac.
The celeriac, yeah. The signature dish, I think that's going to stay there forever, is called celeriac shawarma, and we take celery root, you call it, right? Celery root, and those are the celery root heads, and we cook them in the coal, and then we cut them into wedges and char grill them, and then they go into freshly cooked pita. And there's a secret sauce called bakela, which is a Tunisian sauce, which is kind of what makes it really interesting. It's tons of spinach that are cooked with a lot of olive oil over a very long time. It's an old recipe, and it turns almost black. It's a condiment that is used to kickstart stews and soups in Jewish Tunisian cooking, and that goes in there, and it gives it a really very intense umami and very meaty flavor. So it's a vegetarian dish, but it feels like proper shawarma.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, yeah. I've sold it.
Yeah. Everybody's ready now.
The next question's up on your right.
Hi, I'm just curious where you eat when you're in the Bay Area, your favorite places.
In the Bay Area. Well,
not La Taqueria, because it was closed today.
Yeah, so Samin sent me to La Taqueria, so we have changed my whole agenda for the day. And I arrived ceremoniously at 3 o'clock to have my tacos at La Taqueria, and it's closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. So that's water under the bridge, the Bay Bridge, and the irony of on a book tour, I hardly ever eat anywhere. I just eat my food made by other people in events like today. So I haven't had a lot of good food, but I did have good food here before. Yeah. I went to the Slanted Door.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
you didn't
that
invite
was
me.
delicious. No, that was, you were not here. You were doing something very important. I went to NOPI. That's a very good restaurant.
I know you love Camino also.
I love Camino. Yeah. I mentioned Camino. Yeah. I love State Bird Provision.
I love that.
That was very delicious. I'm trying to think. I love Tartine. How can you not?
Obviously.
Yeah. So those are a few places. Yeah.
The next question is on your left.
Hi, Samin.
Hi.
I wanted to say something before I ask a question, that yogurt and pasta is fine as long as you never ever put mayonnaise on it.
Okay.
That sounds gross.
That's one step beyond. Yeah.
I'll forgive you the yogurt. That's okay. I think you're both charming, and you have such lovely personality that really come through your book and through the curiosity you always show. And I just wonder, how do you go about keeping that curiosity and that research alive as your life get huge and busy and you become like one-name celebrities?
You go, I don't know.
I think, the irony is that in a sense it doesn't really change anything. It's just all part of life. And when I come home, the first thing I get is, up until at least 6 months ago, my youngest son, Flynn, was still in diapers. So as soon as I arrived from a book tour, my husband, Carl, would hand me him with a dirty nappy and would say, "Go change him now. You're not on book tour anymore." So that keeps you grounded, doesn't it?
I hang out with a lot of kids. And
yeah.
They don't know the difference. Kids are the answer to everything, I think.
Yeah, they are. It's very sobering and grounding. And I think the other thing I have to say is that really daily life has got nothing to do with things that happen in the kind of the events or a book tour or where most of the time I go to work, I do my work, we try the recipes. And so it doesn't really change so much for me, that it's great to know that there's people around and that cook, etc. But at the end of the day, I need to make sure that there's good recipes coming out of this kitchen and good food comes out of the restaurant and that the diapers are clean and all the rest. So it's really just all about that. It's kind of just life.
Mm-hmm. I'm at a much different point in this than you are, and I feel like I am doing a lot of shielding of myself. Like I'm trying to not pay attention to the outer thing as much. I mean, I still have deadlines that I'm always missing, and I just have my regular stuff I have to do too, and I find that is really important and grounding and being surrounded by the same people who've always been important to me. So, and also in terms of the curiosity, I mean, I'll speak for myself. Like I am nothing without that curiosity. It's what defines me, and so. If the minute I lose that, my career's over. So I just need to keep, to me, the most amazing thing that any success brings is opportunity to go explore more. And that's the thing I feel the most privileged and lucky
it's everything.
to have.
It's not just about
it's the whole world and meeting people. And
yeah,
I mean, even just the other day in the smallest way, the most wonderful thing happened. This is the tiniest thing, which was somebody sent me a picture of a tadig, a Persian crispy rice that he had made, and I posted it on my Instagram, which I've done a bunch of times, but all of a sudden now I'm getting so many more followers. And so I didn't even ask this question, but naturally all of these people started leaving comments about the crispy rices of their cultures. And there were some that I had heard of, and there were other ones that I had never heard of. And I was like, now I have to write a book about crispy rice. It's amazing. And so that's the kind of stuff that's so exciting, is just getting exposed to more people and more differences, Yeah.
The next question's up on your right.
Hi there. So follow-up question on your celery root. Was it peeled in the recipe you were talking about? Is it peeled? So what's a simple way to peel celery root? Because I love celery root, and I don't use it that often because it's so difficult to peel it.
So the best solution is to cook it and then peel it. And there is actually a recipe in this book for a whole celery root, which I do all the time. There's very little to do, really. You can cook it without peeling, without covering it, but I like to wrap it in something, in foil or something, and put some olive oil and salt. And I find that after a couple of hours in the oven, you get the most beautiful flavored vegetable with no effort whatsoever. After that, you can put whatever you want on it. You can make a salsa verde, or you can make a chili-based sauce, or you can just put some creme fraiche and lemon juice, or you can do whatever you like. But the vegetable just cooks itself, and the peeling is not an option. It's not a problem at that moment because it's all so soft that you literally just take a little knife and it just all comes off really easily. And to peel a raw celery root is a pain. But you really don't need to do that unless you make something with raw. Like a remoulade kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
in that case, you have to cut it in half first so it has a flat edge.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you'll do what I did and stab yourself. So cut the celery root in half, put the flat edge down, and cut around it.
Yeah.
Please.
This will be the last question from the audience, then we'll let Samin have the last question.
Hi, I'm wondering what trends you're excited about in cooking in the food world today, and which ones you're over and ready to see go away.
So I'll start with what I'm ready and over to to see the back of. So I said it today in another context, but I don't think anyone was there, so I can just repeat myself. And that is that trying to connect eating to health. I've had enough of that. And I just find that it's just so ridiculous. First of all, the claims are very, very rarely, founded on reality, but also it really takes the whole joy out of eating. It makes a connection that really is very far-fetched. And then it makes nervous people who always think about their health when they're eating rather than just enjoying what they're eating. And and also I find that people that think like that, we also lose our instincts, because we just think, but we don't taste or enjoy. We just think, oh, is this good for me? Is this bad for me? Is this good for me? Is this for me? This is just completely a killjoy for food. So this I'd like to see the back off.
Yeah. Mine's sort of related in that I think it's like a conceptual thing, which is I'm done with the foods that are made to just look like super outrageous so that you can take a picture of them, but then not
black
eat them. Black things, or like over the top rainbow sprinkle, I don't know what. And so, because that's not food, that's not, I don't know, I would be happy to see that go away. Yeah, like unicorn things and mermaid things.
Oh, my sons will have a big... I don't think they will be happy.
No, not the unicorns themselves, just the unicorn foods.
Yeah, but that includes the unicorn cake.
Okay, fine.
And the future, that is always a really difficult question that I don't really know how to answer. I think people are going to carry on eating more and more vegetables, which I think is a great thing, because vegetables are really delicious.
They're the best.
And I hope we carry on learning more and more what we can do with vegetables. But apart from that, I'm not really 100% sure what is the next trend.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this a trend because it's been happening for 10,000 years, but I'm pretty excited about people being excited about fermentation, yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, now Jordan makes me ask you one final question.
No, but you can give it to the audience because you asked all the questions. You can give them another question.
What?
There's one there, okay. Yeah, one there.
Fenugreek seeds in dessert, in a cake.
Yeah,
and
fenugreek.
It comes from Sammy's grandmother.
Yeah.
It's given to lactating mothers. And funnily enough, the same fenugreek seeds are made into dessert in India and given to lactating mothers.
Really?
So
But
these kind of threads is very encouraging to see that there may be a light at the end of the tunnel, and food might tie us all together.
Absolutely,
eventually.
and fenugreek does have that effect.
Yeah. So I just, again, I'd like to thank you for...
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'd like to thank you, actually.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Samin said a lot of good things about me, and I want to just say a couple of words that are important, because I'm only halfway through your show, so I've watched 2 episodes out of 4. But I think so far I've been inspired, and it's incredible. But it's less about the show, but more about our, getting to know you. And the first time we met, we sat at Camino, and you were telling me about this book project that seemed completely far, like all those illustrations and chemistry and this and that. And I remember thinking, like, how the hell is that going to work? And,
I don't know either.
and I think the most incredible thing is that you created something which is extremely unique. It's not a cookbook as such, it's your creation. You made it happen, and I think everybody who's seen this book, you got all the awards, the official recognition, but in terms of, the world seeing, not many people really invent something new, and you did, visually and with the content, and I think that is really commendable. And now you're carrying on with a television career, so well done.
Thank you. Thank you. What a special thing for us, our ancestors, I think, would be really proud of us sitting on this stage today. So, yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Is that where we go?
I guess.
Thank you.
I don't know. Do we go? Okay.
Do we stay or do we go?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Yotam. Thank you, Samin.